Why are there so many shows starring Muppets and dozens of movies too? They said they'd watch everyone and they mean it. It's something that they've got to do. So now they've pledged you a lifelong commitment. The Muppets, Matthew and Sam.
Welcome to Kermitment, the podcast where two friends have vowed to watch all things Muppets. I'm Matthew Gatos.
And I'm Sam Schultz.
And this week we watched Sesame Street. Or to be more specific, the beginnings of Sesame Street, because we're not going to watch all 5,000 episodes of Sesame Street. I almost didn't believe that number when I looked it up. And
Oh, that's an actual number?
That's an actual number. Yeah. When you do like 130 episode seasons and you do one a day for 50 years.
Adds up quick.
Yeah. But what we watched this week was the very first episode of Sesame Street. We also watched one of the test episodes that they filmed, and the original pitch reel, as well as a selection of other videos from the first year of Sesame Street. And we watched a thing called This Way to Sesame Street, which was a special presentation on NBC that aired a few days before Sesame Street was aired on TV, just to let people know, hey, this thing's coming. So we tried to sort of get the vibe for this first season of Sesame Street as much as we could without watching again like all 100 episodes. And I think personally this was a good introduction to it. It felt like we got the vibe of what Sesame Street was when it started.
Yeah. It doesn't really change for much of the 30 years. Like, I don't think it changes too much. I think new people show up and that's about it. But
yeah, and I think we'll get into some of this, but I haven't kept up with Sesame Street much over the last, 20 years. So it was interesting in doing some of the research for this episode of seeing how many of these humans that are part of the cast early on aren't really featured that much anymore and have sort of been phased out over the last 5-10 years.
yeah, because they're old as hell.
Yeah, that's true. But I also, for me, it's that thing where Bob and Gordon and Luis are all just part of Sesame Street in my head.
Right.
So the idea of, oh, yeah, there's Sesame Street now, and Big Bird's still there, and Elmo's there, but Gordon's not.
Their friends all got old.
Yeah.
They are immortal.
And as we're recording this episode, it's important to mention that there are some big Sesame Street things that are about to be released that will be out by the time this episode is out and you're listening to it, but are not currently out for us to consume. So first, there's the documentary Street Gang, which I have not seen. Sam has. But I've read the book by Michael Davis that it's based on.
And I haven't.
Right. So some of that will be informing this conversation as far as just like our knowledge base of Sesame Street. But as you're listening to this, you could go watch it digitally if you want.
It's really good. The movie is. I don't know what the book is, but
the book is also very good. It reads sort of like The Avengers is the way I would describe it, is the way they've structured it, which is interesting because you'll get like a chapter all about Jim Henson, and you'll get a chapter all about Carol Spinney, and you'll get a chapter all about Joan Cooney, and it feels like they're like building up these heroes separately, so that way when they all come together, you're like, I know those people, and I'm happy they're together now.
The movie isn't quite like that, but the movie focuses not on the Muppets, which I think is really like a really interesting view on Sesame Street that probably most people don't even know. Like the Muppets weren't involved from the very beginning and not really that important for a lot of the development of the show.
Yeah, I think the one thing I took away from reading the book is, which I kind of always knew about Sesame Street, but I think comes across when reading the book, is just how much these people really cared about making sure this show was the show for preschoolers to learn. And how many they spent 15 months putting the work in to have seminars and do research with psychologists to make sure that this show was perfectly suited for children. It would keep their attention. It would teach them what it needed to teach them. And what the book does, at least, is it draws the comparison to things like Captain Kangaroo and these other shows that were around for children at the time that were not really as worried about the educational side of things.
Yeah.
And they were looking at it as like, kids love TV. how can we leverage that for good?
Right.
There's also something else that will be coming out before this episode comes out, but again, is coming out after we've recorded this episode, so we haven't had a chance to watch it. And it's a TV special / documentary retrospective thing called Sesame Street 50 Years of Sunny Days, which is going to be a 2-hour special airing on ABC on April 26th. And it seems like it's sort of like a ton of celebrities and behind-the-scenes things. There's some like making of Sesame Street. I assume there'll be some crossover information with Street Gang of like sort of how Street Gang came to be, but this is probably a little bit more of like Street Gang for the masses. Plus probably here's Neil Patrick Harris to say something about Cookie Monster.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to watching that, but again, we have not seen that one yet, but we encourage you to go check those out if you want to learn more about Sesame Street, because I'm sure we'll be watching those soon. And before we get into the Sesame Street of it all, we got to talk about our old friend Kermit a little bit. I think
This is big Kermit time.
It's big Kermit time.
I was
think
surprised.
we are fully in the Kermit the Frog as we know him era.
Yeah. It kind of seems like Sesame Street is the reason that they finally take the like you're a frog now plunge too.
Yeah, I went ahead and compiled some stats since we've been talking so much about like when did Kermit become Kermit. And we talked about how in 1965 Kermit the Frog was said by Johnny Carson. So that was one of those things where we don't really know because of the Missing Today Show appearances and all this stuff, whether or not he was called Kermit the Frog before that. We assume so, but there's no proof as of right now. But at that time, Kermit was still, rocking his red sweater or just being naked without his fringe from time to time.
And I gotta say, have the big weird sausage legs. That is another part of Kermit that isn't quite right yet.
Yeah. There's things about Kermit that just, if you saw that Kermit the Frog puppet in somebody's collection, you'd be like, I think that's fake. I think that's not the real Kermit.
That's like from communist Russia in the 80s Kermit. That's just a rip-off Kermit.
We then had in 1966, we had Florence Henderson referring to him as a frog. We had also in 1966 when Kermit plays the hipster in Visual Thinking, which we talked about sort of being a very out-of-character moment for Kermit, where it just felt like you just used any puppet and had him be a hipster. It didn't feel right.
Certain parts of that, well, I think you have this noted later, but certain parts of that do carry over to the pitch reel, I would say. Certain parts of that attitude of Kermit.
Yes, and that's when we start getting into, in 1968, we had the Muppets on Puppets, which we talked about last week. And in that, Kermit is still wearing his red sweater.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, but interestingly, we have this sort of mishmash of time that's happening right around 68, 69, where the Muppets and Jim Henson are making the Muppets on Puppets, the Muppet Puppet Plays, the Muppets Making Puppets. They're also making Hey Cinderella, and they're making the Sesame Street pitch reel all around the same time. Like some of these things are happening early 1969, some are happening mid 1969, and it's all around the same time. So in one of the sections that we weren't actually able to see from Muppet Puppet Plays that we didn't have access to, Kermit has his green collar on, in that he has his green fringe. And he has that in Hey Cinderella as well, which I believe was filmed before these other things.
Yeah, I'd assume they made that for Hey Cinderella, like that version of the Kermit puppet.
Yeah, so I think we'll be watching Hey Cinderella next week, but it seems like Hey Cinderella, Muppet Puppet Plays, and the Sesame Street era is sort of the solidifying of who Kermit is, at least visually. Mostly, I think, character-wise as well, because some of these early Sesame Street sketches also feel pretty locked into who Kermit is.
One very specifically does, I would say.
But we do have in the pitch reel, to me at least, a different Kermit a little bit.
Being a fucking asshole is what I would say.
Well, he also, to me, because you have these sections in the pitch reel where it's Rolf and Kermit talking. And I'm pure speculation here. I'm going to assume Jim Henson was controlling Rolf in that segment.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Because I think the voices are obviously pre-recorded, so they're both Jim Henson.
Right.
But the performance of the Kermit puppet feels very off to me, and he's doing a lot of facial things that we've never seen him do before or since, really.
Well,
so it feels like somebody else is controlling Kermit.
That makes sense. It didn't even occur to me that couldn't be him in both places at the same time. He also just seems like whenever Kermit is with Rolf, and this happened in all the PBS kind of specials we watched last week too, he just doesn't like Rolf, and he's very rude to Rolf, and they don't agree about anything, and he's kind of like Rolf's devil's advocate sort of. And that really comes across in this, where he doesn't believe that Sesame Street will work. He's also using a lot of hipster slang like he did in the visual thinking thing, which is very weird.
It feels like if you just watched this after like seeing the more modern Kermit, you would assume that this is how Kermit just used to be, because it feels like a very solid character choice, but it's not anything we have really seen outside of his slight conflict with Ralph.
Maybe he's like that in Hey Cinderella. Maybe he's a jerk.
Maybe. We'll find out. But this week, we did not watch Hey Cinderella. We watched Sesame Street, all those things we mentioned up top. And Sam, what's Sesame Street?
In the late 1960s, Joan Gans Cooney, a television producer who's still alive, she's like 92 or something, had an idea for an experimental TV show that used the tricks of television and advertising, like cartoons, repetition, and like intense focus testing to teach children instead of try to get them to buy things, like I said earlier. So she put together the Children's Television Workshop. They got an $8 million grant from the government, and they started planning the show that would become Sesame Street. So Cooney wanted Jim Henson and the Muppets on the show. I think people told her that was not a good idea, but she was very insistent on it. I guess probably because they're cute and she knew kids would love them, but also because Muppets Incorporated at this point, post Jimmy Dean, they were making a TV special that hadn't aired yet. Primarily, they were a commercial-making business, I assume. Jim also brought with him, you're going to add more people to this list, but Joe Raposo, who was a songwriter who was working on Hey Cinderella with him, the TV special I mentioned a second ago. And he was writing songs for that show and music for that show, but he would go on to be like the music director for Sesame Street for a decade or something like that, and wrote the main theme for Sesame Street, C is for Cookie, Being Green, and probably like any other song that you know from Sesame Street. But they also brought, you were talking about this earlier, who else did they bring with them? The Muppets?
A lot of these weren't necessarily brought with the Muppets, but it was sort of a convergent evolution type of thing where some of these people worked together on Hey Cinderella, and then when Sesame Street was coming together, because they needed people who were in the children's space of creating things, we had John Stone, who was involved as a director and head writer on Sesame Street early on, but he sort of came to Sesame Street separate from Jim Henson. And then the same sort of happened with Charles Rosen, who was the set designer on Hey Cinderella. He got involved, I believe, because of John Stone, and then he had also worked with Jim Henson. And so there was just like this great little mishmash of people who worked with Jim Henson previously, knew he was great, knew he made great commercials. But there was also this group of people who were on the Sesame Street side of things, like Sam Gibbon, Dave Connell, Joan Gans Cooney, John Stone, and Lloyd Morissette, who it's in the book, it's really interesting. They talk about how there was basically like this dinner party. I think it was at the Coonies' house, and like a few of them were just hanging out, getting drinks. And Lloyd Morissette was talking about how his daughter was obsessed with TV and watching commercials, and they were just like, "Yeah, we should use that for good. Maybe make a TV show." And they're like, "Ha ha ha ha!" And then like the next week, they were all like, "Wait a minute, let's actually do that." And so yeah, there's this whole cast of people that I encourage you to either, if they talk about them in the documentary or in the book, you should, if you want to know more about any of these people, go in. They're fascinating people. Some of them very complicated people. Some of them did not get along with each other at all, and were basically like, I'll only take on this role if I don't have to talk to that guy ever. And John Stone specifically seemed like he could be hard to work with at certain times.
Yeah, from the documentary, it seemed like everybody didn't like interacting with him, but they knew that he was like very instrumental and important to making the show happen. They just didn't want to like have anything to do with him.
Yeah, I watched as part of the prep for this, and spoiler alert, our Muppet of the Week is Big Bird this week. And in preparing for that, I rewatched the I Am Big Bird documentary about Carol Spinney, which is very good. We'll always recommend that. But in that, he talks about his relationship with John Stone at some point just soured and got really confrontational, and he wasn't really sure why. But he also says that John Stone was the best director for Big Bird segments that he ever worked with. And so it's that thing that's like, you don't have to be a tortured genius to be a genius. Like, you don't need to be a jerk to be productive.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's who John Stone was, is that he was maybe quite a jerk and hard to work with, but people also respected his work, which doesn't forgive the terribleness that he maybe had on set, but was just part of who he was.
I don't think he wasn't too horrible, just curmudgeonly maybe.
There was some stories in the Carol Spinney doc where he's specifically ignoring Carol Spinney on set or congratulating everyone else on a good day and then purposefully like walking past Carol Spinney and not congratulating him.
That's sad.
Yeah. So it seems like he was very like spiteful at certain moments and just like, I'm going to take this out on you in a very passive aggressive way.
Weird.
To get that wrapped up, not all of them came with Jim Henson. And there's actually a very funny story where they were doing one of these seminars, like an hours long meeting where they were all talking about what was good for Sesame Street. And I said funny. There's a little bit of a dark side to it where Joan Cooney got worried because suddenly in the middle of this meeting, a long-haired, bearded man came and just sat silently in the back of the room. And she was like, what's happening? Because apparently at this time, there was some like bombings happening as part of protests from like some hippies. And so she looked over to, I think it was Dave Connell, who's the executive producer on Sesame Street, and said like, I'm worried, like, what is this guy going to bomb us? And he looked and he laughed and he said, I don't think so. That's Jim Henson.
Well, there's also a little thing called the Manson family murders that happened the summer that they probably were doing this.
Yeah. So the hippies were scary at this moment.
If they had known him, if they had known Jim 2 years previous to that, he would have been wearing a suit and had a much more reasonable beard, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of the Muppets, as we do on this podcast, they originally weren't going to interact with the human cast. So there was like street scenes where they were having a little, not like a soap opera, but there's a little storyline that went through every episode. But the kids loved the Muppets so much in the test screenings that characters like Big Bird and Oscar became main characters, and they would live on the street with all the people. And the pilot episode is one of the first things that I watched, at least for this round. And that was one we watched was pre-Muppets as characters on the street. And it is indeed kind of weird and uncanny and boring. So the kids they kind of nailed it on that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's odd that like they talk about the Muppets as these things that exist, but we don't see them interact in a way. So it's like a separate story time of like, and now cut to the Muppets.
Yeah. So anyway, after a lot of focus testing and pilot episode making in late 1969, the first episode of Sesame Street aired. It featured the main host, Gordon, walking a new resident of Sesame Street around the street, meeting characters like his wife, Susan, Bob, who is just some guy, I guess, who hangs out on the street, Bert, Ernie, Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, Mr. Hooper, and all the characters who would still be there like 30 years later, except the lady who knits. She wasn't there later. And that, like Sesame Street is today, the street scenes are interspersed with shorts, cartoon shorts, comedy segments that teach letters and numbers, kind of a different set of letters and numbers every day. And it's Sesame Street. People know how Sesame Street works. The first episode is pretty much the same as, not maybe the same as an episode you could watch today, but the same as an episode you could watch in like the year 1999 or something. I think now it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think since HBO took over, it's maybe a little different. But there's also the note on the DVD that we watched, which is like Sesame Street Old School Volume 1 or whatever, that there's a note of like, hey, this is more for nostalgia's sake, and this episode is not really approved for preschoolers of today, which makes sense because there's things they've changed about some of the characters as far as what's appropriate to teach preschoolers over the years. And I think specifically there's one segment that's like around like teaching kids about what these words mean, about like what going around something means, what going over something or under something means. And it's basically just like kids playing in ditches and open construction sites and a junkyard. And I'm like, this is one of those ones that would not be recommended to preschoolers today because there's no parents around. It's just 3 little kids running around a junkyard.
I was in shock that entire time. It felt so much like an Adult Swim thing where like something really bad was going to happen. Like the music would just like get more and more ominous. They were crawling through pipes. They were walking on sawhorses. I was so nervous when they were walking on sawhorses. Because if you walked on a sawhorse for real, the board would flip up. And
I could see a version of that's like a dark twist where like they're doing this and then they just turn, they're like, wait, where's Tommy?
Yeah. He didn't
like
go
Tommy
around.
fell into a cement mixer or something.
He's at the bottom of the foundation. No one's ever going to find Tommy.
He's under the bridge.
Yeah. He's under the water. So we also watched a pitch reel that we talked about where Kermit and Rolf talk about the show and decide the name of it together, which I couldn't really figure out but I assume this was sent to PBS affiliates and like public television stations.
Yeah, so it was sent to channel managers, essentially. Like, it was sent to them to convince them to program this show, like, on their channels. Like, it was sent to program managers to be like, hey, here's this show we're coming up with for kids. You're going to love it. Please put it on TV.
Okay.
Because it was also that thing of they really wanted to have it on TV at like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, depending on your time zone, because they wanted it to be that time where the older siblings have maybe gone off to school, the preschooler is alone at home with mom, and this was going to be the time where the preschooler got to have access to the TV. So it was before maybe the midday shows for the parents started, but after the other older siblings had already gone off to school.
Right.
So there was this really specific time period that they wanted it to hit. And so they had to sort of convince the program managers that it was worth it to give up that hour.
And we also watched the special that we talked about, the Xerox presented special on NBC, where Bert and Ernie kind of just hang out and introduce you to the concept of the show and walk parents through what to expect and where to watch it and when it's coming on. Finally, we watched a supercut of the best season 1-ish, I think, Muppets segments and kind of like cartoons and stuff of the show. Highlights include Kermit singing Being Green, Ernie singing Rubber Ducky, and James Earl Jones as the show's first like movie star guest, I think, counting to 10 in a very James Earl Jones sort of way. So we just covered the first episode, but I don't assume we'll jump back into Sesame Street until the end of the 70s probably, or maybe mid-70s or whenever we decide to do it. But by the end of the 70s, the show would have changed kind of substantially in cast, but not really in concept. So Gordon was recast like 4 years in over some creative differences that are pretty complicated. The original Gordon still worked on the show as like a writer for some sketches and a voice of one of the characters, Roosevelt Franklin, but he wasn't Gordon anymore. Cookie Monster shows up in the 70s, Grover shows up in the 70s, Snuffleupagus, Prairie Rose, the Count, Luis and Maria, who are two more human characters who get added to the show, and way more Telly Monster, like anybody besides Elmo you can think of was on the show by the end of the 70s. But it was still basically the same old show, including it used a lot of the same cartoons. They just replay those kind of like animated segments over and over again, and probably still replay a lot of them to this day. This was also a big summer in the world. This was, like I said, the Manson murder summer, also the Zodiac killer summer, also the Apollo 11 moon landing happened this year. Scooby-Doo debuted on television, The Brady Bunch debuted, Monty Python debuted, Woodstock happened. And in Muppet World, Hey Cinderella had already been made, I think, but hadn't aired on TV.
I think had aired in maybe Canada or the UK, but had not yet aired in the US.
Okay. And also weirdly, not to be diminutive to these two events, to like the things that happened in these movies, but this year and last year, 2020, saw the release of The Trial of the Chicago 7 and Judas and the Black Messiah, which both are happening in 1969 too. So if you want to learn more about 1969, go watch those two Oscar-nominated films that came out this year.
That's a year right there.
Yeah, the Zodiac Killer and the Manson murders happened the same year. I did not know that. Bad time to be in California.
Well, jumping back a little bit, you mentioned the Gordon recasting, and that's something I wanted to touch on too, because actually there's 3 Gordons. The very first test episode we watch is a completely different Gordon, who's played by Garrett Saunders, who I don't know if he was in the other 4 test shows they did. They filmed 5 test shows. We could only find 1 to watch. But that's the first Gordon. He was recast before the show actually started to air. So then we see Matt Robinson, who plays the first Gordon for the first few years of the show. Yeah. And then Roscoe Orman is the eventual Gordon that most of us in our age bracket would recognize as the bald, mustachioed Gordon.
The first guy from the test pilot, they didn't even know who he was. I think Sesame Street launched like a huge social media campaign to try to figure out who that actor was pretty recently.
Yeah, I read about that. It was like 2011 or 12 or something like that. People started to be like, "Hey, who is this guy?" And people were like, "Oh yeah, we don't really know." It was like, how do we not know the original Gordon's name
on like the film reel or something? I don't know. He wasn't in the credit. Like, wasn't his? I guess maybe there weren't credits on it. No, there were. Weren't there?
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think so, because they all just end with like, "All right, bye, see you next time."
Well, I feel like the pilot episode might be a good place to jump in, too. I feel like that guy had the deck stacked against him. That episode was a mess. I feel like he could have pulled it off if they had Muppets on the thing for him to interact with. And he wasn't just in a void with these two children who didn't react to anything that he said.
Yeah, it was a bit bizarre. I mean, the episode opens up with him repairing the sidewalk out in front of 123 Sesame Street. And again, one of those moments that they would not probably have on TV now is that he's has the wet cement there drying, and these two kids walk up, and he's like, "Well, you know what wet cement is for? Writing your initials in." And so both of their names start with D. I think it's like Donald and Dave.
David or something like that.
Yeah. So he has them he puts their initials into the cement, and then after that he wants them to practice writing their D's, so he just sends them over to the doors where like Big Bird lives and just has them write with chalk
all over
1,000 times or something. But yeah, no, I agree that I think he does the best with what he has.
Yeah.
I don't think he is bad as Gordon, but I think it's very odd that we don't get the jumping around a little bit here. In episode 1, we get Gordon, who is introducing this character of Sally, who's a new girl to Sesame Street, and he gets to introduce her to all of the Muppets and all of the people, and it's a very natural way to lead us into the show.
Going on.
Whereas, like, Gordon number 1 is just kind of like, I'm going to build a bookcase, and I'm going
I
to
forgot he was building that bookcase.
repair the sidewalk. Like, it's like he's the superintendent for the whole street.
Right. Gordon in the first episode of the actual show is a science teacher, and Gordon in the first episode of the pilot is like the building superintendent.
But yeah, the test episode, there's a few things that are just like really off about it, which again makes sense. These weren't necessarily intended to air, so we can't judge them too harshly because they obviously made these changes. But Ernie sounds like Rolf, whereas like Ernie eventually ends up sounding more like Kermit. Yeah. But in this, it's very clearly Rolf, just in an Ernie costume, essentially. And we also get the different theme song at the beginning, which, as we now know, I think every other version of the Sesame Street theme song has been sung by children.
Yeah.
But this version was sung by Bob. Bob McGrath, who plays Bob on Sesame Street. I found the most fascinating things about Bob. He was huge in Japan.
He was?
He was like the definition of big in Japan before Sesame Street. He was
before Sesame Street?
Yes.
What?
He was this, basically, he was just a young Irish boy from Illinois who grew up having pipes of gold. And so he went on like to sing professionally. And before Sesame Street, he was over in Japan, and they would call him Bobu or Babu, which is what he went by. And he was just this celebrity singing to thousands and thousands of teenagers. Like he was like, I don't know, like a Donny Osmond or whatever you want to compare him to.
Did he put out albums?
He did. He put out a lot of albums, some in Japanese. And there's this episode of To Tell the Truth that he's on from around that time. I believe, again, this came out before Sesame Street, where they're basically saying that, like, this person is famous in Japan. And so they're, like, quizzing them on all this Japanese stuff. And at the end, he gets up and he sings Danny Boy in Japanese.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
It's great.
He had 8 hit albums and 30 hit singles in Japan before Sesame Street.
Yeah. And so it's a weird thing where a lot of the humans who came on to be on Sesame Street were famous in their own ways or like successful theater actors and all these things. So the idea of going on to a children's show, I specifically watched an interview with the eventual Gordon where he was talking about he was like a serious theater actor, and the idea of doing a children's show was kind of, he felt like beneath him at first. And he kind of just took it at first because he was about to have a kid and was like, I need steady work. And then realized that like, oh, this show is actually committed to being educational and good.
Yeah, and the way he plays it is really interesting too. He's so natural. The first Gordon is so like, specifically the way he talks to Oscar, like him and Oscar the Grouch hate each other and they're just like insulting each other. And whenever Oscar's like thumping around in the trash can, he's just like, oh, this asshole again. Come on, kids, let's go make fun of Oscar. And then Oscar pops up and he's like, fuck you, Gordon. And then he's like, fuck you, Oscar.
Yeah, we get Orange Oscar in episode 1, who is just doesn't have. I don't even think he has arms yet in this episode. He's just sort of.
He doesn't.
He's just sort of like a blobby orange thing that is
His
like
eyes
still
move,
very
though.
much Oscar. Yeah, he feels like Oscar, but he's maybe a little bit meaner in the earlier days. He doesn't yet have the like heart of gold that Oscar eventually gets. There have been eventually Oscar will be our Muppet of the Week, I'm sure, but there have been interviews where Oscar has said that if he takes a bath, he's actually still orange. That the green is all just moss on top of the orange.
That's fun.
That's how he covers when people ask him, like, didn't you used to be orange? But yeah, in the test episode, aside from just the differences in like the theme song and stuff, we get to see something that was apparently at least there in the early days of Sesame Street, which is these little cartoons that were created outside of the Sesame Street pipeline, because we see a Superman cartoon.
Yeah, a very short clip of one too, where he punches Titano the super ape, and then that's it.
Well, and don't forget, because it's educational,
Right.
after he does that, he just yells, D!
Yeah.
Which,
There's nothing.
okay.
It's not like he's punching something that starts with a D.
Nope.
His head just pops up and he goes, D.
Yeah.
I forgot
Which,
about that.
like, at least later on, we saw a short cartoon of Batman.
Yeah.
And Batman and Robin chasing the Joker, and they basically just, like, let the Joker jaywalk so that he gets hit by a car and
So he
arrested.
learns a lesson.
Yeah. So at least that has the educational thing of, like, cross the road at the crosswalk,
Yeah.
kids.
And I guess
This is
Batman
just-
was in it more than just that one time, too. I think
Yeah.
he was a mainstay of early episodes, which is very weird.
And when I was reading about this, they use the Batman TV series as like inspiration for Sesame Street in like, how do we keep kids' attention? How do we make this fun and campy and interesting? So it's nice those two sort of came together. But this Superman clip is clearly just from a Superman cartoon that they inserted and then just had somebody yell, D!
That's so
Because
funny.
there's no line. Literally, we're not even like being hyperbolic here.
Yeah.
He punches him, then he shows up for a close up and just yells the letter D. And that's supposed to be the educational brought to you by the letter D segment. There's also a segment in the test episode that's very chaotic, which I kind of enjoyed, but I can see why they wouldn't have done this exact kind of thing later on, where Susan is in a little like room with like 6 or so kids doing a like, what else is round? What else is a square? What's a triangle? What's a pyramid kind of thing? And these kids are just shouting and yelling like preschoolers would.
Yeah.
But she does a very good job of handling that situation.
She was probably happy that the outcome of the regular show was that she did not have to do that anymore.
Well, and there's a clip we watched in the This Way to Sesame Street special where she's doing a similar segment, but it's like on the stoop of the apartment building, and it seems a little bit more controlled with maybe slightly older children.
Yeah.
Because there's parts in that one where she's just asking like, what else is shaped like a pyramid? And these kids have no answer. So she's like, all right, let's move on to rectangles. What else is shaped like a rectangle? There's one of the clips specifically that we watched from the season 1 best of DVD thing. Lou Rawls is singing the ABCs, and there's kids there like shouting along with him. And that's one specifically where there's one kid who is just giving it his all and shouting as loud as possible. And there's a kid right next to him who every time that happens is like covering his left ear to be like, this freaking kid, man. But yeah, it's fun to see those other, like Lou Rawls. There's a Jackie Robinson ABC's one of some of these celebrities they had on early. Like you mentioned, James Earl Jones is one who's on there just staring at the camera.
Well, I think they found too that's like there's some actual scientific paper about the James Earl Jones effect where him counting, and then there's one where he does the alphabet. They're like supernaturally good at teaching kids the alphabet and counting. Maybe for like the unknown unquantifiable thing that is just James Earl Jones, but kids were like way more captivated by him and his voice, and they after like one viewing they could recite the alphabet with him or like count with him because there was just something about it.
The James Earl Jones of it all like felt weird to me, but I could totally see why that would be ingrained in a kid's head, almost as like a fear response of like, this man is just staring into my soul and injecting the alphabet into me.
But it also does feel like how modern Sesame Street celebrity cameos are like, kids aren't gonna care, they don't know who the hell this person is. But this one did feel a little bit like, hey, maybe your mom's watching and she thinks James Earl Jones is handsome. She likes staring into his eyes for 10 seconds while he counts to 10 with you.
There's a fun fact about the James Earl Jones of it all too, because his acting teacher when he was coming up was Will Lee, who plays Mr. Hooper on Sesame
Whoa.
Street. Yeah.
That's wild.
So when they did that episode, it was like a little reunion of him with his acting teacher.
Oh. I had never seen Mr. Hooper before in anything, I don't think. I'd
Yeah,
only
Mr.
seen the clip when
Hooper-
he died. And he's kind
Yeah,
of...
Will Lee passed away
so
in
crabby.
1982.
Yeah.
And yeah, Mr. Hooper is the shopkeep who made Big Bird's birdseed milkshakes. And yeah, I think as well, like I knew of him as a character, but mostly because of the episode where Big Bird has to deal with his death.
Yeah. He's so angry.
does
Mr.
seem-
Hooper is.
Yeah, very. I wonder if they toned that down over time. If they were like,
Maybe.
we have Oscar, we don't need Mr. Hooper to be
Yeah.
another Oscar.
He doesn't like any shenanigans really in the first episode at least.
Yeah, he doesn't like people like loitering around.
Oh
his
yeah, he yells
shop.
at Bob for loitering.
Yeah. This street of like 4 adults. He's mad that like Bob's gonna be in the way.
Yeah. I'm still blown away by Bob. He does have a beautiful voice. And I really liked the clip where they were singing the different things that they have 2 of, the hand song.
Oh yeah.
Because the first time he started singing, I was like, holy shit. I've seen Bob before, but I don't think I've ever seen him singing.
Yeah, I've at least never connected it with being good. Like I figured like a lot of these like children's shows have like adults on there who's like, oh, you're gonna sing a song now. It's like, oh, I am? Okay.
That's what Susan kind of seems like. Like they just dropped it on her that she was going to have to learn how to sing.
They in reading about her audition, she had done some singing, but mostly like show tune kind of things. And when she showed up for her audition for Susan, it was her and then like 40 white ladies with long blonde hair with acoustic guitars.
Okay.
And so they had all come prepared to like do like Joan Baez sing along with the kids type things.
Yeah.
And so she walked in not really prepared to do a performance, and they're like, where's your guitar? And she's like, oh, I was hoping you guys would have like a piano player. And they're like, we don't. And she's like,
no.
okay, I'll just do this a cappella, I guess. And it got her the job,
she nailed
obviously.
it.
Yeah.
One more thing before we move on totally from the pilot episode is that the ending of the pilot episode is just Gordon and those 2 kids from the whole episode watching a raccoon try to eat grapes out of a bowl of water, and the raccoon literally is incapable of chomping on a grape, and they just watch this poor baby raccoon like push the grapes around with his nose and desperately try to eat it, and then at the end the raccoon like runs into the set. Gordon's like, well, I guess I have to go get it. And then he just, the episode ends with him like climbing behind the set into it to try to get like behind the building to try to get the raccoon that ran away.
Yeah, they just like let it play out in real time. No one thought like maybe we should cut and try this again. They're just like, let it go. Let's see what this raccoon
And then
does.
while the credits roll, he like walks out with his hands on his hips without the 2 children, and he's just like, well, I don't know what happened in there, but
I guess they'll handle that raccoon.
yeah.
And then there's a couple other moments that one I really liked and was very curious about. Another one I'm like, that would not happen now on Sesame Street. The one I really liked was there's this triangle and square animated section.
Talking to each other about which one's better.
Yeah. And the animation is so smooth and good that it almost looks like rotoscoped or puppeteered in some way that it's like this level above every other piece of animation we have seen on Sesame Street that I don't know how I would find out more information about this pilot episode of Sesame Street animation, but
I'm
very
pretty sure
good.
that was some kind of camera trick, puppeteering.
Yeah,
or
that's what I was wondering.
they like
if
ran
it was like
through
rubber
a
bands
weird-
in front of a green screen or something.
They ran it through a weird filter to make it look real because it looked like really early computer animation, which I don't know if they were doing that in the 70s.
Don't think so.
But it was definitely either a physical or computer animated object moving because there was not. It was real looking, very weird.
Yeah. And the last moment that, again, is something I don't think they would do nowadays is Ernie rips off Bert's nose.
Yeah, and puts it on his own nose.
He's talking about like how many eyes he has and elbows and all these things. And he's like, I have 2 noses. And Bert's like, you don't have 2 noses. And he just rips off Bert's nose and attaches it to his own.
That and a few other things that have happened in the stuff we've watched has made me wonder how connected Muppets pieces are to them. Like, could you just take like Fozzie Bear's nose off, or do they super glue certain Muppets' noses onto them, or like sew them on, or is everybody just like Velcro together?
I think it's mostly glue once they commit to it, but I'm sure they have versions of them where it's just double-faced tape or Velcro or something for bits like that. But I would assume that even just to keep the character looking the same, like, you're not going to walk up to Fozzie now and like flick his eyeball and it's going to go flying across the room.
Yeah. But there's like a story of the Jimmy Dean show where he like makes Rolf's eye fall off. I don't think they filmed it, but I think it was an audition. And he gives Rolf a pat on the back or something and his eyeball falls off. So
That'd be terrifying.
Maybe they just didn't have good glue technology back then or something.
All right, as we move on to episode 1 of Sesame Street here, there's a little bridge that I want to mention here that happens across all of these. And you texted me about this because I don't know why, but Carol Burnett shows up in all of these.
Yeah.
For like less than 2 seconds. Like a sketch will end, she'll pop up and just be like, that was weird. And then we move on to a thing. And she's wearing like a dancer's outfit. And I don't know
And
why.
she doesn't do it after every sketch. She does it after one sketch in the pilot and in the first episode. And if you blinked, you literally would miss that Carol Burnett was in the show. It seems like they went to her right after the Carol Burnett show ended filming one day. And they were just like, hey, Carol, can you say that Winnie the Witch is weird? And then she did. And then they were like, okay.
But it was also like they said, hey, could you say this? And she just said it monotone, like, that Winnie the Witch is weird. And they're like, cool, perfect, got it. She's like, wait, you don't want me to do that again? And they're like, no, we got it.
Or she was like, that'll be $10,000. Because her show was huge then.
Yeah, but it seems like the most bizarre use of a celebrity.
It's also the only celebrity cameo, I think, in the
first episode.
In the first episode, yeah.
I'm wondering if there's, because again, they shot these so far ahead and there's 5 episodes in that first week, that maybe that sort of built to something. Maybe she has a sketch later on in the week or the following week where she's wearing that outfit and doing more.
That makes sense.
And they just like use these little clips to introduce her. But just seeing these few episodes, it's very bizarre. Because like you said, at first I didn't even realize it was Carol Burnett. And then she has a slightly longer line, I think in This Way to Sesame Street or something. But I didn't understand why she was there.
Maybe kids loved Carol Burnett back then. They lost their goddamn minds when she popped up on the screen.
Like, we can't rewind, but I wish we could so we could watch Carol Burnett say that one thing again.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're on episode 1 of Sesame Street, this premiere episode. We get to see Big Bird finally. We get to see Oscar.
He's got a very tiny head.
Big Bird, yes, has the very tiny head, a lot less feathers than he has now. That was fixed pretty quickly within the first year or so of Big Bird existing.
In that supercut, you can see slowly them adding more weight and feathers to his head specifically.
Yeah, and his character also changes pretty quickly because in this first episode, he's very stuttering and nervous and sort of like a country yokel kind of.
He's like goofy.
Like, oh, God. Yeah, he's exactly. Yeah, my impression that I just accidentally did was pretty much a bad Goofy impression. But yes, it seems like that childlike, naive Big Bird is still there. Yeah. But it's a different, slightly, I don't know, like the way Gordon treats him is sort of like that Gordon also didn't treat Oscar very nicely. He's also just like, come on, Big Bird, you can see this little girl, she's right here.
Big Bird
figure it out.
He's not coded as a child like he is now. He was just like some dummy who lived next door to him.
But what do you think of the first episode, as especially like a first episode of this show?
Man, so first of all, I'm not sure I ever really watched Sesame Street. It was not.
I had the same reaction where I'm sure I did, but again, when you're 3 or 4, what memories are you really forming?
Yeah. It just, the format wasn't familiar to me at all, and like the human hosts weren't all that familiar. Like I'd seen still pictures of them, I knew who they all were. I thought it was really good. It was the most Muppety thing that we've watched so far, I feel like. I feel like it really made a huge step. Bert and Ernie and Oscar, and well, not Big Bird as much, but Bert and Ernie and Oscar and Kermit, they all feel like Muppet personalities we haven't really seen yet that we're gonna see a million times in the future. And like the first thing that kind of like blew me away when we started doing this show was that Sesame Street was so early on in Jim Henson's career. Because I figured he had done a bunch of stuff, and then they tapped him to be like, hey, now it's time to give back and make a children's show. But this is like the first huge production he did, really.
Yeah, we're only like 14, 15 years into his career since the Muppets existed. And we'll talk probably more about that next week when we're talking about Hey Cinderella, because we're going to be wrapping up the 60s with talking about Hey Cinderella and be talking about this 15-year period that we've covered. But I think it's interesting looking back on that, of like how far he came in this 15 years and how these characters, like you said, are very, very Muppety. And Bert and Ernie feel like, yes, they're different now. They have different performers now. The things have changed with HBO taking over Sesame Street. But Bert and Ernie, like the characters, are there from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's like Sesame Street is so fully formed from the very beginning. And it's also character-based sketches, which he did with Jimmy Dean, but that's not really what he was doing in his TV appearances. And I assume we never saw him doing that on Sam and Friends. So I assume, except for like Harry the Hipster and Kermit segments. So that is a new like proto Muppet Show kind of situation where these puppets are like really interacting with each other as characters and like having disagreements and stuff.
And I think we've talked about them being mostly like a puppet act when they went on to these TV shows. And in our TV appearances of the 60s episode, we went into the 70s a little bit. So we crossed over with Sesame Street. And even in those, they still felt like an act. Like when they were doing the Ed Sullivan Show, it was like, hey, come on, we're going to have this little scene from Jim Henson and his genius Muppet friends coming out.
But when Big Bird is on, in the very last one we watched, Ed Sullivan is like, this guy's a big star now, Big Bird. And they do introduce him like he's an individual being that is not a Muppet.
Yeah, it seems like Big Bird specifically took off pretty quickly. And Sesame Street was very successful right out the gate. This was like what people were looking for their kids. We'll sort of see Jim Henson's reaction to this as he starts to make other things outside of Sesame Street. But for right now, he's sort of like riding high he is on TV on a daily basis.
Helping the community, which seems like something that will really soak into his soul. So the other interesting thing I thought about the first episode was that you get a lot of Kermit, and you get a lot of Kermit. We've already talked about this a little bit, but you get a lot of Kermit as you would know him today. Also, he's just like an adult hanging out with the grown-ups, like doing card tricks and stuff, which I thought was kind of cool. But specifically with the this is skipping ahead a little bit, but with the It's Not Easy Being Green, I feel like that is the moment that Kermit becomes like the Kermit we know, because that is what imbues him with his kind of melancholy angle that he does not had up until now. No,
and I think you're right in that the scenes we get with him interacting with the humans feels very Kermit. And the ones with Cookie Monster where he's got the W that he's trying to teach kids about W.
He's trying to hold it all together. And chaos is happening around him.
Cookie Monster is tearing off parts of the W until it becomes an N, and then a V, and then an I, or a 1. And Kermit's just trying to power through as Cookie Monster is eating parts of it. And then later on, he gets beat up by the letter W as well. But yeah, I think it's fascinating to see just how Kermit became Kermit. And
how much of that happened on Sesame Street, it seems like.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's this sort of thing of like, well, we can't change him now, even if we want to. Because I feel like there was like a freedom before Sesame Street that Kermit didn't need to be locked into this frog role, that he could be whatever he wanted to be. But it seems like once we hit Sesame Street, Kermit is locked in as this sort of melancholy, the straight guy in the comedic situations.
Surrounded by baby monsters who like to eat him and destroy him. And it makes the Muppet Show seem even weirder as we get closer and closer to the Muppet Show, because it is like a crossover of a Sesame Street character and this old school Jimmy Dean star. It just seems like kind of out of nowhere almost.
Right, like if you were just a fan of Sesame Street. And then suddenly they were like, oh, we're going to do this new show called The Muppet Show. It's got that guy from Sesame Street on it. And then a bunch of Muppets you won't recognize.
That you've never seen before,
And it isn't for kids.
What did you think of Sesame Street?
I had a similar reaction in realizing that I don't know how much Sesame Street I really watched as a kid. There are pictures of me with like an Ernie doll from when I was really little that I'm like, okay, I assume my parents did just buy that for me because like I probably liked the show and found it interesting. I had a Tickle Me Elmo when I was like 9 or whatever like that, because I am always one to get swept up into a craze.
Well, I think just real quick, we know about Sesame Street, people our age, because I think there's always a ton of licensed Sesame Street stuff, but I feel like there was like a blitz of Sesame Street stuff when we were kids, and they were.
I don't even know if that's
everywhere.
new. I think that's just always
Has that
been
just
the
always been it?
case because
Okay.
in the I Am Big Bird documentary, they talk about how within months of Sesame Street being on the air, you couldn't go down the street without seeing a kid with a Big Bird toy in their stroller. So it was very quickly Big Bird became this huge thing that they were like, we need merchandise. And
Interesting.
it's also, I know one of the contractual things with Sesame Street was that Jim Henson split the money on the merchandise, like 50-50. It's like the Children's Television Workshop and Jim Henson split 50-50 any merch money. So I think they were probably also like pushing that merch because they had to share the money for it. I don't know if Sesame Street's ever like really had a like taken a dive in any way of like if it's ever been not as popular as it's been since the beginning. I'm sure there are times the ratings have been down, or I think part of this like HBO merger was to try and reinvigorate it a little bit. But yeah, I feel like it's always been a part of just our lives. Like it's always been there. I remember specifically as a kid, it felt like everyone had that Play School Little People Sesame Street toy where it like folded in half and you had all the little characters. And I just bought the Lego set yesterday of the
Basically
1, 2, 3.
that same thing in Lego form.
Yeah, which I didn't realize until like after I bought it and got it home. I was like, oh, this is essentially that for adults. So like the kids, the people who had that as kids now just like build their own version of that. But yeah, I think I like the idea of Sesame Street and what it does so much. Like I respect Sesame Street and I can't wait to have a kid who I can plop in front of the TV and let them watch Sesame Street and let them fall in love with it. But I think as I started to form memories, I was very quickly moving on to the Disney Channel and Nickelodeon stuff faster. And I think maybe that was just because it was more flashy, but I can watch it now and still enjoy it. And again, really just reading about how it came about and watching what goes into it. I don't know. It makes me have this like respect for it.
Yeah.
That is, it's not that it's not there with the rest of Muppet stuff, but the fact that like this was created as a solely positive venture in the world of like, we are going to make an impact. We are going to help preschool kids become smarter, no matter their like financial situation or race or where they live or like whatever, is so admirable to me.
Yeah. And it does, from like a perspective of this podcast, it does feel to me at least, and maybe this isn't true at all, but like it did kick Jim Henson and company into like a different, better gear than they were in before.
Yeah, I think it had to. Like if you were working around that sort of behemoth of a of a TV show, like I'm sure your brain changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was producing so much for that show at the beginning as well that he clearly cared about it because he's doing the Muppet performances in every episode, and then he was also responsible for a lot of the early animated segments as well.
Yeah, his voice pops up in some of them, you can tell. Yeah.
And he did the music as well for a lot of those animated segments. He had I think he had one of the earliest like Moog synthesizers, and it was just like him messing around with that to make some of that music.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think in reading again about it is like some of the things they considered before the show was going on the air was like Joan Cooney was like, it's important that this be in color because we want to teach kids about these things. We want the Muppets to be flashy and colorful to attract kids' eyes. And they also were working with RCA to donate color TVs to daycares.
Oh.
Because color TVs were not super popular yet. And so they wanted to make sure that these color TVs were available to as many kids as possible around the country so that they could watch it the way it was supposed to be watched.
Yeah.
And that's just another thing where it's like going above and beyond what you would even expect.
It is like applying the like thoughtfulness and like resources that you would if you were making something for like purely capitalistic reasons to something that is just basically, I mean, they sold toys, but like the idea before to sell toys was just to help people, and that they went to all of these lengths to do that. Doesn't seem like even something that could possibly happen anymore to me, but I don't know.
Well, and it feels like something that would just be like dragged by conservatives as being like too woke or like SJW kind of thing, because the show was created to be accessible to inner city kids and like suburban kids and like affluent kids, like at the same level, because there's a reason they chose to set this on like a grimy, dirty inner city street.
Yeah.
Basically, they talk about that so many children's shows were set in fantasy worlds where it was like a mystical castle or all these things that weren't relatable to children.
Yeah.
So having it set in a brownstone on a dirty street where trash is just sitting out, and then having the first face they see be a black man who's a science teacher was really important to the people watching this show and the messages they were trying to get across. And I think that is something that they were doing because they knew it was important. And Joan Cooney's husband was like a civil rights lawyer who was like very on the ground activist and involved in a lot of civil rights issues in the late 60s. So this is something that they clearly cared about and clearly thought was important. It comes through, and it's nice to watch that and see that this is accessible to a 3 or 4 year old watching this and just as a like interesting TV show, but as an adult going back and watching it, realizing that a lot of this stuff was groundbreaking at the time.
And it just feels kind of like we've lost our way from that since then a little bit, or like that kind of thoughtfulness and care put into these sort of things. Just like Sesame Street's still around and still kind of like the only show that does or did that kind of thing that stuck around or like had a lot of money poured into it by advertisers and the government and stuff.
Well, and it's interesting, too. It seems like early on, some people were convinced this is going to work, this is going to revolutionize television. And then other people who were signing on to work on it were just like, yeah, this will be a fun few weeks. Like this, I think this sounds like a great idea. I respect what you guys are doing. There's no way this is going to work.
Well, in the pitch reel, there's a clip of one of the teachers they hired, and she's like, well, I don't know. I still don't like the fact that this is all animated. So she must have been maybe one of those people who was like, this isn't going to work. She's like, I think it's too colorful, I think is what she says. Like, I'm worried about all the color and the motion. Like, maybe you don't get it, lady. But
yeah, get out of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this first episode especially I enjoyed for the most part. There are segments that, you know, I could have done without.
That's just for babies. I already know all that stuff. I know where milk comes from.
It comes from these cows that we're going to talk about for 20 minutes.
That was so long. Yeah.
There's also, again, some more segments that I understand why they were probably phased out over the years. Like there's a segment with the Anything Muppets that feels like an extension of the segments we've seen across all different TV shows where they're replacing the noses and eyeballs on different Muppets to get different emotions. And there's a segment with Gordon where he's like, there's these blank Muppets that just pop up and he's creating a brother character and a sister character and an uncle character and all these things that I'm like, I feel like, one, for branding purposes, and two, to not freak kids out that you're taking the faces off of your characters.
Yeah.
That probably didn't last very long, this idea of adjusting the faces of these characters. Like, removing Elmo's nose at this point would be a very bizarre move.
Sure.
But also there's Buddy and Jim.
Oh, Buddy and Jim.
When they popped
up in the pilot episode, I fast forwarded through it because I couldn't do it again.
Yeah, we had to watch that one a couple times. Buddy and Jim are these two guys who are just off on their own. They don't interact with anybody else on Sesame Street. They're a pre-recorded segment that's just off. And it's two guys who are both not very smart. One is slightly smarter than the other, but not by much.
They're both dumb in different ways.
It's played both for laughs, but I think also slightly teaching kids something.
Directions or something. I don't know.
I think it's like it's letting the kids be smarter than these grown-ups, which I think is an interesting angle to attack something from.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
it's annoying.
It's annoying, and like you're just watching these guys not know how to turn a hammer around.
Yeah. It's like Mr. Noodle, but Mr. Noodle's a million times better than these guys.
Exactly. So I don't know how long Buddy and Jim lasted, but if I had to watch more Sesame Street, I would probably also be fast forwarding through the Buddy and Jim segments.
They didn't last past the first season.
That makes sense.
One and done with Buddy and Jim.
There's also a moment that obviously you're not supposed to see or acknowledge in episode 1, but in the first Bert and Ernie segment, you can see Frank Oz very clearly in the corner of the screen. Yeah. You see his sleeve at first, like coming out of the bottom of Bert, but then you can see like his glasses and the side of his face just in the bottom of the frame. And I'm just like, that's something they avoided most of the time up until now.
Or it's like sometimes when a movie's not matted correctly for some reason, maybe the TVs just didn't show that, or there
Maybe.
was like TVs were like 8 pixels big, so you couldn't see anything. But,
Yeah, they had the very like bulbous screens that were
Yeah.
rounded a little bit, so maybe they didn't realize he was in there.
you can definitely see like a blue sleeve poking out from the bottom of Bert quite a few times, though.
I also had the note of when we watched the Rubber Ducky sketch that I never thought about it before, but it's a bit bizarre that Ernie is the only Muppet that I think we see clothed and unclothed. Like, there's either like naked Muppets, like you have Cookie Monster, like Big Bird, Kermit, that don't wear clothes,
Yeah.
or you have fully clothed Muppets.
Okay. This didn't occur to me, but you are exactly right.
It was suddenly like, oh, we don't see a lot of Muppets take off clothes. And
I
like,
think
to be fair, we don't see Ernie take off his shirt to get in the bathtub. We just see him in the bathtub.
Yeah.
But the idea that there's like this line of clothed and unclothed Muppets, and
Yeah.
Ernie crosses that line.
Yeah, he does have a big, broad orange chest that is kind of just staring at you. It's also funny that from the first second you meet Ernie, they establish him as somebody who loves to take baths, too.
Mm-hmm. He's named his bathtub Rosie.
And he's not even singing the Rubber Ducky song in that part. He's just in the bathtub, and like Bert's hanging out in the bathroom with him, I assume, just like having a chat about taking a bath. And that was the character trait that stuck with Ernie forever. So with the pitch reel, Rolf is a huge part of it. And
Yeah.
it feels like they're implying that he's going to be on the show. But why wasn't Rolf on the show?
Yeah, he almost seems more like he would be playing the Kermit role
Yeah.
on Sesame Street, because he's the one telling Kermit about this idea for the show that they're going to do, and the Muppets will be there and all this stuff.
And Kermit doesn't
so
even
it's-
want to do it.
No, not really. He comes up with the name Sesame Street, but
Then he hears that
doesn't-
they got $8 million to do it, and then he's like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. But Ralph is the one who seems like he would be heavily involved, and I'm sure there's probably an example of Rolf popping up on Sesame Street at
He
some
does
point.
pop up once on Sesame Street, but it's a couple
Yeah.
seasons in, I think. And I don't know if he was ever considered to actually be part of it, and maybe it's just the same that they did for every other pitch reel where they had him in it because he was the Jimmy Dean dog, but at this point
Yeah.
that was so far removed that it didn't matter that he was the Jimmy Dean dog, and he just was like a residual thing that they did. But
Yeah, I'm assuming it was just that, like, who's our two most famous Muppets we have?
Yeah.
Like, let's put them in this pitch reel so that way the program managers for the channels are like, hey, we know
Mhm.
that dog.
that makes sense. Maybe, yeah, because I feel like he's too commercial. Like he was made for commercials and then was on Jimmy Dean show, which is like kind of not the opposite of what they're trying to do, but an example of like the junk TV that they didn't want kids to watch necessarily. So maybe he was tainted and he was never supposed to be on there. But I bet you're right. I bet he was a Trojan horse trick.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're going to have a famous Muppet on this TV show.
But that was like Rolf's last hurrah, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to be in other things, but as like a starring role,
Yeah,
not so much.
yeah.
There is something we did not get to watch because it just does not seem to exist on the internet. It's called the Pied Piper of Astroworld. And this is, we've talked about how we haven't been able to see certain episodes of the Tonight Show or Ed Sullivan or Our Place at the Jimmy Dean Show because they just don't exist. But the Pied Piper of Astroworld is one of the first like television specials they do that we're not able to watch. And it's apparently just, there's a Houston-based amusement park called Astroworld.
I think it's a Six Flags now, or just out of business or something.
Yeah, either of those makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But this special was apparently Soupy Sales, who was a popular entertainer at the time, going around Astroworld and showing it off. And Rolf and some other Muppets, I believe, are also there.
I think Rufus is in it.
Yeah, I think so. And so, yeah, I think Rolf had some moments, and he obviously gets to play a part in the Muppet Show and the movies. But
Like I said in the Rolf segment, in the Rolf Puppet of the Week, he never gets to be the main character of a storyline in the Muppet Show. He's just
the
always
close he
there.
gets, he's Dr. Bob. He gets his doctor sketches. But that's, I think Rolf is sort of, the time of Rolf is behind us.
Yep, it's the time of Kermit. Kermit has forcefully taken over and dethroned
Yeah, there's like
Rolf.
two divergent things happening right now, which is Kermit's about to take off and Big Bird is taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just rule the Muppet scene.
Leaving Rolf in the dust.
Speaking of that big old bird, Big Bird is 8'2" tall.
In actuality, he is 8'2" tall?
Yeah.
Oh.
Basically, he's, as Carol Spinney says, he's as high as my arm can reach.
Right. That makes sense.
Because for those that don't know, Big Bird is what they call a full body Muppet. There's a handful of these throughout the years. Obviously, you have people like Sweetums and Thog and a bunch of other big costumed mascot type Muppets. But much like the LeChoy Dragon, Big Bird is one that is controlled with a arm just straight up above your head. The hand is controlling the mouth, and the pinky is controlling the eye movements.
I knew that, and I've always thought that sounded horrible. Your pinky would hurt so bad.
The description of operating Big Bird in I Am Big Bird, the documentary, which again, most of my information comes from that. And also, I recommend everyone watch that documentary because it's just so fascinating. But the description they give of operating Big Bird sounds like the worst gig ever.
Yeah.
You're inside this costume that you cannot see out of. No one can see you. You have your arm up above your head for a long period of time. Your pinky is trying to control the eyeballs while your left hand is controlling the left hand of Big Bird. The right hand is connected through a string to the left hand. So basically whatever the left hand does is counterbalanced by the right hand. But then you're also having to perform your lines, which Carol Spinney would tape the script to the inside of Big Bird's belly.
Oh, no.
So he would be reading the script as he's doing all these other things. And then he had a monitor, which was like a 2-inch screen strapped to his chest. So he's looking down at this monitor, which is mirrored, so he can see what the TV audience is seeing.
Which is also an old monitor. It's probably got fucking hot.
Well, and like even up until he retired, he was still using like the old school monitor because it was what he knew how to use. So he had like this 2-inch, really crappy monitor strapped to his chest, watching a mirrored version of his performance while he's reading the script off of the belly, while performing with his hand above his arm or a hand above his head, with a pinky controlling the eyeballs, and doing all of that at the same time, sometimes while on roller skates.
For like 30 years or something, more than 30 years. How long?
Yeah, he almost hit 50 years.
Holy shit.
So Carol Spinney was the first performer for Big Bird back in 1969. Again, this documentary will tell you a lot more about Carol Spinney. That's worth hearing. So if you want to know more about him, go watch that. Also, read Street Gang. They talk about him in there as well. But Carol Spinney was a guy who was really into puppets since he was a little kid. His mom built him like a replica Punch and Judy set when he was really little. Oh. She really encouraged him. He had a terrible dad who was not supportive of anything he ever did, it seems. But his mom thankfully encouraged him to do these things. And just like everybody else, guess where he met Jim Henson?
At a puppet convention.
You're right, Sam. So there's a couple stories of the way they met. They met once briefly, and Jim Henson was like, hey, you should come to New York and talk to me about the Muppets. And he was like, all right, whatever. I don't want to come to New York just to grab lunch with some dude. And so didn't respond to that. Later on, in 1969, like just a few months before Sesame Street is set to go on the air, they're developing this thing, there's another puppet convention. Jim Henson goes, and Carol Spinney's there performing a show. He has this whole thing set up. It's a one-man show where he's going to perform this thing in front of a screen where there's like a projection happening. He's in sync to the music and all this stuff on the screen. And as he goes to do it, somebody had turned on a bright spotlight that was not there in rehearsals.
No.
So the bright spotlight washes out everything on the screen, and he can't see what he's supposed to be syncing to. So he stops, and he goes behind the screen and performs a silhouette of himself pulling out his hair, like miming pulling out his hair because he's like freaking out. If I remember correctly, they got it back on track a little bit and were able to at least perform some of it, but not as he sort of wished. And so he's back in his dressing room, not very happy with his performance, and Jim Henson comes in and says, I liked what you were trying to do out there. Do you want to come to New York and talk about the Muppets?
What the
And
hell?
at this point, Carol Spinney's like, can you be more specific? Because you said this once before, and I don't know what that means. And he's like, oh, I want to give you a job. And he's like, oh, okay,
Oh my
sure.
God. He stiffed Jim Henson once and
Yeah.
still got a fucking job with him?
Yeah.
What the heck?
So he comes on down, and he becomes Big Bird and Oscar very shortly thereafter.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
And part of this was because the first thought of who was going to play Big Bird was Frank Oz, but Frank Oz hated being the LeChoy Dragon. He hated that operation of
I wouldn't want to do it either.
No.
That would be a nightmare to look forward to decades of doing that.
Yeah, and so Frank Oz did not take that on, but Carol Spinney was willing to do it.
Huh.
There's some stories about Carol Spinney being sort of an outsider from the other Muppet groups. He didn't really fit in with Jim and Frank and these other guys.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't interact with their characters very much, does he?
And they talk about that a lot of, like, not only did he not really interact with them, both of his characters were kind of loners,
Yeah.
but also as a performer, he was always shoved in something and not visible to the other people. Whereas, like, when Jim and Frank are doing Bert and Ernie, they're face to face
They're
under a
next
table.
to each other. Yeah.
They're interacting. They get to be chaotic together, whereas he is closed off from everyone.
He's in a trash can.
Yeah, he's either in a trash pile or a trash can, or he's in a big old bird.
Okay. Are those the only characters he ever did? He never really overlapped with the Muppets any other way?
As far as I saw, no. As far as I remember reading about him, he does not perform any other Muppets. I'm sure he did, because he had range. He used to be on he was on like one of the early incarnations of the Bozo Show. And he played like 10 different characters on Bozo. So he has range. He's done it. But I think once he locked into Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch, he was pretty locked in. And like I said, he played Big Bird from 1969 through 2018.
Oh my God.
When he officially retired in 2018. Now, along the way, as he was getting older, he realized, I'm going to need an apprentice. I'm going to need somebody to step in. So Matt Vogel became the apprentice in 1997.
Whoa.
It was when Matt Vogel started to come in and train to become Big Bird.
Okay.
Matt Vogel, we've talked about in the past, he is also now Kermit and a bunch of other people, but he's mostly Big Bird and Kermit at this point. But he stepped in 1997 to start apprenticing as Big Bird. And as he says in the documentary, basically anything that Carol didn't want to do, Matt Vogel would do. Carol Spinney didn't seem to like doing like green screen and blue screen kind of things. So at that point, he would just be like, hey, Matt, you come here. You do this. So for years, it was basically Matt Vogel and Carol Spinney doing things off and on. Like if it was a live performance somewhere out on stage, Matt Vogel was probably handling it. But if it was on set on Sesame Street, it was probably Carol Spinney. And I think it's a testament to Matt Vogel's performance that it's kind of hard to tell when those switch up. Like I think his Big Bird is really, really good. And in the later years, Carol Spinney started to just not be able to perform as Big Bird anymore. His arm just couldn't handle it. And so there was times when other people would be in the suit, but he would be doing the voice, like they would be acting to his voice. And that was up until 2018 is when he finally stepped away as like doing any part of it. He was no longer doing the voice, no performance, anything. And then in 2019, a year after he retired, is when he passed away.
Okay.
But yeah, Carol Spinney was one of the few who was there from the very beginning of Sesame Street. And much like Jerry Nelson was there until he died, Carol Spinney was there pretty much up until he died. But Big Bird himself, the character, much like Kermit, very hard to do a full history on because, Jesus, Big Bird is just everywhere.
Yeah.
His species, as they've called him on many things, is Bigus canarius. He sometimes says he's a canary, other times jokes that he's related to emu because that's why he can't fly, and other things. The bird species kind of a gray area, but his birthday is March 20th. He is eternally 6 years old, which was decided not immediately in Sesame Street, but like a few years into Sesame Street, they're like, he's 6, and he's always 6. His best friend is Mr. Snuffleupagus, who for a while was believed to be not real. Was basically an imaginary friend, and none of the adults on Sesame Street believed Mr. Snuffleupagus was real. But there were some advocates who reached out to the Children's Television Workshop to basically say, hey, this could potentially be a problem for kids who are going to report things to adults and are afraid adults won't believe them, whether that's assault or other things. And we would like it to be a thing where the adults can now believe Big Bird and don't think he's just lying.
Right.
Which was obviously a good call. And as we mentioned earlier, Big Bird was also good friends with Mr. Hooper before he passed away.
They were like frenemies, kind of, though, right?
Yeah, I think it was that sort of like begrudging, like, okay, Big Bird's here.
He loved Mr. Hooper, but Big Bird is... nobody really wants Big Bird hanging out for too long.
And Big Bird also had a problem pronouncing his name. He would call him Mr. Looper sometimes.
Oh, right.
So I think that didn't make Mr. Hooper very happy, that he also couldn't get his name right. But yeah, so we see Big Bird having these relationships with some other characters on Sesame Street. But he was really the standout star from day one. Kids love Big Bird, as he's sort of the surrogate for them. He's like their window into this world.
Yeah.
Big Bird's feathers are white turkey feathers dyed yellow.
What? They're real feathers?
They're real feathers, and there are approximately 4,000 feathers on Big Bird, which are replaced like every 2 weeks.
Oh, no.
So there's a lot of turkeys out there giving their
Giving
feathers.
their lives or feathers
Maybe
at least
not-
for
yeah.
a Big Bird? Can you ethically pluck a turkey? I'm not sure you can.
Maybe they have like a deal with Butterball where it's like, hey,
Yeah,
when you
that's
pluck your
probably
turkeys
it.
that you're already going to be turning into meat for people,
Big Bird's
give us your
not-
feathers.
Big Bird is not cruelty free.
No, Big Bird's not vegan. But some other fun facts that came out from watching that documentary. Big Bird received his Hollywood Walk of Fame star in 1994, which we've talked about, I think, with Kermit before in the past. There's not a lot of fictional characters that have stars in the Walk of Fame, so that's a big deal. One of the weirder twists in the story of Big Bird is that there was plans to have Big Bird fly on the space shuttle, specifically the Space Shuttle Challenger.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, they were thinking to have kids interested in the space program. What if we had Big Bird fly on the space shuttle?
Would Carol Spinney have been on it?
Carol Spinney was going to travel into space on the space shuttle, and they were going to bring the Big Bird suit so that they could take like footage of Big Bird in space. But it was determined that the puppet was too heavy and too bulky to bring on the space shuttle. Like, obviously, when space travel is involved, every ounce is very important. So they were like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we don't actually need to bring Big Bird to space.
Holy shit.
So that stopped that from reaching fruition. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is Big Bird has a teddy bear friend named Radar.
Well, I guess
who
it's
is
worth
just-
mentioning for people who don't know that the Challenger exploded.
Yes, I was going to get to that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
But that's then there was also the plans to include his friend Radar, the teddy bear,
Okay.
to fly on the Challenger. And Radar was even included on the mission plan as part of this that they kept
Was he
trying
on
to. No, the plan was scrapped. I think, again, they were just like trying to cut weight. But in Big Bird's place, they chose to send Krista McAuliffe, who was the teacher that they had on the Challenger mission
man.
to get kids interested. And yeah, as Sam alluded to, the Challenger was the famous space disaster. The Challenger exploded shortly after liftoff. And because the teacher was on board is when they had millions of kids around the country watching it at school.
Jesus.
And like, it's one of those things where obviously it's a huge tragedy. But can you freaking imagine if kids watched Big Bird explode on the Challenger?
That would have
Like,
been
if there's
fucking awful.
like traumatizing these kids even an extra level from
Yeah.
watching the Challenger tragedy of the idea of like, oh, hey kids, Big Bird's on the space shuttle.
Yeah. And it actually being Carol Spinney, too. That would have been
Yeah.
awful. I mean, it
Yeah.
was awful anyway, but that just
Yeah.
would have been so bizarre.
Yeah, it's one of those things where definitely a different time in the space program when they were just like, hey, you Muppet performer, get on the space shuttle.
Yeah.
But it seemed like one of those things that they talk about in the documentary. Carol Spinney and his wife both talk about, like, NASA came to them and was like, you want to do this? And he's like, I guess, sure, why not? And then it just didn't work out by happenstance. He just ended up not being on that.
Carol Spinney would probably be a good astronaut because he's probably very used to being extremely uncomfortable.
That's
It
true.
wouldn't have been that weird for him, I bet.
Yeah, he'd be like, well, whatever.
I could do that and then be in zero gravity. It'd
Yeah.
probably be nicer to be in zero gravity because the TV screen wouldn't be weighing you
Yeah,
down.
holding your hand above your head would probably be a lot less hard. But yeah, I think that's the most wild part of the documentary that just kind of comes out of nowhere. But also it's just a fascinating, like, what if sort of
Yeah.
scenario to imagine. But moving on to maybe the happier side of Big Bird. We like to do a family tree segment to talk about like what relatives have been explored in the world of the Muppets. I can't. There's too many.
Oh, yeah. He's got
Big Bird
cousins
has
all
a
over the world.
full family tree.
Uh-huh.
He has his cousins that he's talked about, which are like all the different versions of Big Bird that are on the international versions of Sesame Street. But he's had everything from, cousins to his mom, his granny, his nanny, his adopted family, which is a dodo family in the
I
movie
didn't know
Follow That
that.
Bird. Which I'm very excited to get to Follow That Bird because I have never seen it.
I haven't seen it either. I used to watch Big Bird Goes to Japan all the time. We just had a VHS of it for some reason, and my dad really liked it.
No.
I don't remember that one super well, but I've never seen Follow That Bird.
Yeah, Follow That Bird seems like something that we would probably really enjoy
Yeah.
based on what I've seen of it, but have not yet watched that. We'll get to that eventually. But Yeah, he has a huge family from books to Sesame Street to everything. I guess when you do 5,000 episodes of a thing, they're going to need to cover some ground.
Yeah,
So
you got to think of new episodes to write.
yeah, it's like, we need a cousin. We need an uncle. Slap a hat on that Big Bird costume. So yes, Big Bird has an extensive family that has been well explored. So we can't dive into all of those. But most Muppets, it seems like their family, it's more extraordinary that they do have family because they don't explore that very often. So it's like, oh yeah, they have one uncle and a cousin that we ever see. Whereas Big Bird is just, if there's a family member that exists, Big Bird has it.
Well, I feel like the Sesame Street Muppets tend to have a family because I guess that's a kid kind of thing that kids like too.
Right. If kids are going to ask, where's Big Bird's mommy? Where's Big Bird's uncle? Like, why doesn't he have a dad? Like,
you can write him a whole paper about where Big Bird's mommy is.
So yeah, as I mentioned, Big Bird, again, appears in many, many things. We saw him in the Muppet movie. He appears throughout the Muppet Show and other cameo appearances in many, many things. More recently, he's done things like he did an episode of Lip Sync Battle, which was very enjoyable.
Okay.
He did an episode of SNL during the, I think, 2012 presidential race because Mitt Romney was like saying he was going to take money away from PBS, and everyone's like, you're going to fire Big Bird.
Right.
And there was some people being very upset about that. But I think one of the cooler moments that have ever happened with Big Bird, and this is obviously just cooler to us more than anyone, is that Big Bird was a part of the Project for Awesome in 2016. For those that don't know, which I'm assuming most of you listening at this point of us releasing this podcast probably know what the Project for Awesome is, but if not, Project for Awesome is a charity fundraising live stream event that our bosses, John and Hank Green, do every year. And in 2016, I think it's the Yellow Feather Fund, which is like a Big Bird related charity, was one of the guests on the live stream. And so they had somebody from the Yellow Feather Fund there to talk to, I think it was John. And then Big Bird was also there on the live stream talking to John.
Yeah.
And then as he's walking off camera, yells back, "Don't forget to be awesome."
That was very cute.
And everyone, I remember that like during Project for Awesome, our office is not a very productive place because we're all watching the live stream while we're trying to edit videos. And I just remember I shared an office with our friend Nicole at that time, and we're both watching it like silently, like on our own. And then in that moment, we both just like lost it. We were so happy when Big Bird said, "Don't forget to be awesome."
Oh.
And so it was a very like weird crossover time with the Muppets.
Yeah, we almost know Big Bird.
We kind of, we're like 2 degrees from Big Bird.
We almost know Elmo, and we almost know Big Bird. We're so close.
And we have coworkers who have worked with Kermit.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They'll eventually be guests on this podcast at some point. But we're so close, Sam.
Yeah.
We've almost met Muppets multiple times.
We'll get there eventually. I will lick Ralph's nose before the end of this.
Do you think that's a crime? Do you think you can get arrested?
No. What are they going to charge me with? Destruction of property? I'm not going to bite it hard. I'm not going to leave teeth prints in it. I just want to get a little just to see.
All right. Well, don't play this in court as evidence, anyone.
No court in the world would convict me. They'd all want to do the same thing. Rolf would be like, "Yeah, I want to even bite my own nose."
It's really hard, though. I can't reach it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all the fun facts and things I had collected about Big Bird. Again, watch I Am Big Bird. It tells you everything you need to know about Big Bird. And we're definitely not going to stop talking about Big Bird anytime soon because he makes many, many TV appearances coming up that we'll talk about, as well as eventually we'll get to watch Follow That Bird, which will be very exciting. So yeah, to wrap up the Big Bird of it all, do you like Big Bird?
Of course, everybody likes Big Bird. I kind of have a problem with some of the Muppets from Sesame Street who are babies, just because ever since I was a kid, like with the Rugrats and Muppet Babies, I don't like fictional baby characters. They just annoy me. So he's fine. I loved that skit he did with Little Bird that we watched where he's like trying to figure out why they're both birds even though they're different sizes, and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna be friends forever." I thought that was really good.
I like that he doesn't think he's a bird at first. Like he just cannot comprehend that like small birds exist.
Birds are big, yeah. But yeah, he's fine. I didn't like him in the first episode. Too annoying, but he got less annoying. I love Carol Spinney because Oscar the Grouch is like among my top tier Muppets. That's more of the kind of Muppet I gravitate towards, though. Kind of like the cranky but heart of gold kind of like flawed Muppets, and Big Bird's just a little bit like, I'm a baby. But when he sings at Jim Henson's funeral, you're not going to start freaking crying. He's Big Bird.
Yeah, in going through our spreadsheet and scheduling out future episodes, we're going to have to do an episode about the Jim Henson Memorial.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be so hard and sad.
It's hard not to get emotional when you hear Being Green, like in any capacity.
Yeah, and they that clip is in the Big Bird documentary as well.
Yeah.
And it just, oh boy, when at the end where he says, "Thank you, Kermit."
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Carol Spinney is like, to me, like a top tier Muppet performer.
Yeah,
By a
he
long
very
shot.
much sells the case that we've talked about where the soul of the Muppet itself is the performer. Like there is a commitment there when we've talked about the Steve Whitmire controversy around Kermit and the transition from Jim Henson to Steve Whitmire to Matt Vogel. It's sort of that thing with any these old school Muppets who were played by the same person for so many years. Like they're just one and the same. Like Carol Spinney is Big Bird and Big Bird is Carol Spinney.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very long episode already, and I hate to drag it out anymore, but it is interesting to me how much better the Sesame Street Muppets have lived with switching performers than the Muppet Show group of Muppets.
Yeah, I don't. You can obviously tell slight differences if you go and listen to voices and whatever, but they had to do an Elmo switch not that long ago, and new Elmo is great. Like
But
new
even,
Elmo,
even like when they show up on stuff, or like the type of things they do with them hasn't changed. So it's not like the Muppets where it's more like, what do we do with you now? Like, I guess you're kind of mean and jaded or something, or like you're just different than you were before. But no matter
it's probably
what,
that like the Sesame Street Muppets don't go away.
yeah,
Like they're
on TV every day forever. Yeah.
right, and so you have 500 examples of Bert being Bert.
Right.
It's hard to suddenly pivot and say, what if Bert was this now?
Yeah, you don't have to reboot Bert and sit in a room and be like, what do we do with Bert? Maybe Bert is on the dating scene, or like maybe Bert owns a bar now.
Right, whereas like when you have the Swedish Chef and you use him in the ABC sitcom as like, oh, he's the craft services guy on the set of this show, and then on this he has a cooking segment, and then on this now he is a celebrity chef. It's like depending on the format the Muppets are working in, their characters kind of have to adapt to that, and some perform that role better than others, where it's like, okay, Kermit can always be the producer of this thing, and Miss Piggy can be a star, Fozzie can be a comedian, but like you have these side Muppets who you're just like, I don't know what your role is in this show.
Right.
So we're just going to change your character a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's one of those things that we'll see some growth and some change of these characters. And I think it's also very easy to think about how like the Muppet Show was on for years, and there's a lot of episodes of that, but it's sort of like become this lumped thing of like the era of the Muppet Show Muppets versus like some of the movie Muppets versus the now version of the Muppets. And so I think once we're like living through the 70s a little bit as we go through this list, it'll be more interesting to see if there's growth and change in some of these characters that feels maybe a bit more natural as we watch it happen.
Yeah. Stuff's really about to start happening too. 70s.
Yeah, we
wild.
got a lot coming up in the 70s. Some TV specials that are sort of going to like be a little bit calmer as we get into before the Muppet Show, but we've got Hey Cinderella, we've got the Great Santa Claus Switch, we've got the Frog Prince, we've got some original dramatic storytelling coming up that we have not yet watched. But before we do any of that stuff, I'm sure you're enjoying some non-Muppet things as well.
I sincerely this week did not. I didn't have any time. Like, I've been working a lot, so gotta say, didn't watch anything. I've been watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I am completely right down the middle. I don't think about it highly one way or the other. So highly.
Yeah, I haven't watched a single episode yet.
You should wait till it's all out, I would say.
That's kind of my plan now. There's like one episode left at this point, so I'm like, you know what? I'll just wait and watch it all in a weekend or something.
Yeah, it's fine. I think I watched that on Friday, and that's like the only thing I watched. We've been watching Friends too. We're almost done with it. Rachel just had her baby.
I was confused there because when you said Rachel had her baby,
Oh,
I thought you meant your Rachel,
No,
not
no,
the
no.
TV's Rachel.
sorry.
Yeah. And I was like,
I haven't seen you.
I
in a
know we
while.
haven't seen each other in person in a while, but I feel like you would have told me
Yeah.
if you had a baby.
No. Rachel Green from Friends has just had her baby with Ross Geller.
Spoiler alert for Friends.
And that's a fine show. Very problematic in a lot of places, but it's also fun, you know.
And we just finished our rewatch of The West Wing,
Mm-hmm.
which was like my third or fourth time watching it all, and Devin's second time.
Uh-huh.
But we also were enjoying the latest season of Taskmaster.
Oh,
So
I've
sort
never
of-
watched that.
I think you'd enjoy it.
I think I probably would too.
Yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, we've been watching season 11, which is very fun. And yeah, if you're a fan of Taskmaster, you know, you're watching this latest one. Mike Wozniak is maybe one of the best Taskmaster contestants ever, and everything he says or does is like immediately memeable in a way that is like accidental. Like he just does a thing and you're like, you don't even realize how bizarre of a human you are. You just say things as if everyone says things that way. But he's a weird man with a mustache who just wears a suit and feels like he's awkward in every possible situation.
You love British stuff, huh?
Yes? Is there past?
Yeah, the show where they're practicing for a Zoom play via
Oh, staged.
yeah.
Yes.
There's one more I think that was British. I can't remember what.
Probably.
It
I do consume a lot of British things, and
Yeah.
most of my recommendations on YouTube these days are either Muppet related or like British panel shows.
was. Uh-huh.
So that's mostly what I'm consuming is Muppets or British panel shows.
Muppet
So,
Show is a British production. So
That's true.
There you go.
just fully steeped in the culture.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next week we are moving on from Sesame Street. We are going to wrap up the 60s by talking about Hey Cinderella, which has an exclamation point, so maybe I should yell it. We're going to talk about that. We are also going to talk about a short little 4-minute pilot they recorded for Wizard of Id, which is a
Yeah.
comic strip that they thought they were going to turn into a TV show.
Bad comic strip that sucks.
And not a great pilot either. But we'll be talking about those. If you want to watch those along with us, you can always find our playlists at our Twitter account, which is @KermitmentPod, where we tweet out the playlist of what we're going to watch for the upcoming episode, and you can watch those along with us. Again, usually we'll recommend if there's things you can skip, because sometimes we make playlists that are way, way too long, and you shouldn't have to watch 6 hours of the Mike Douglas show
Nah.
to keep up with this podcast.
Just find the part where they're playing charades.
Yeah, but Hey Cinderella is just one thing to watch, so we got a bit of an easier week coming up. So I'm looking forward to watching it, and hopefully some of you will watch it along with us. We want to thank our friends, Tuna, for creating the music for this podcast, and Cassie Wilson for singing the theme song to this podcast. And before we go, I do want to mention that we have an email address, which is mail@kermitment.com. If you have any Muppet memories you'd like to share with us, either about Sesame Street or anything Muppets, we might read some of those out on the podcast in the future. So feel free to share those or just tweet them at us @KermitmentPod.
Or if you have something that we can't find otherwise.
Yeah, that too.
Insider information.
Yeah, because my resources when I'm digging are pretty much archive.org, which is immensely helpful, and also just YouTube.
Yeah.
There might be some resource out there that I have not yet found or tapped into. So if you are, like a distant relative of Jimmy Dean and you had a bunch of tapes sitting in your garage that you want to share with us, hit us up, mail@kermitment.com.
If you have a Rolf puppet I can bite, please call me.
Yeah, if you have anything to share with us about the Muppets or any thoughts that don't fit on Twitter, hit us up at the email, mail@kermitment.com. Or you can find us individually on Twitter. I'm @Matthew Gatos.
And I'm @Slam Schultz.
And as always, keep believing.
Keep pretending.